Rome and Carthage, two titans of the ancient world, two names forever bound together, not by alliance or trade, but by a century of relentless conflict, a struggle that defined an era. Their clashes echoed across the Mediterranean, shaping the course of history. Their rivalry was far more than mere politics or territorial disputes. It transcended diplomacy. It was a deep-seated hatred, a mutual animosity etched into the very soul of both peoples, passed down through generations, fueling their relentless wars. It was a clash of civilizations, a fight for survival. The First Punic War was a brutal and protracted naval struggle, primarily fought for control of the strategic island of Sicily. It was a war of attrition, testing the limits of both empires. The second, legendary, a conflict that would forever be etched in the annals of military history. Hannibal's daring and audacious crossing of the Alps with his war elephants, a feat of military genius and logistical nightmare. Rome teetered on the brink, nearly destroyed by Hannibal's relentless campaigns on Italian soil. The very survival of the Republic hung in the balance. Yet, Rome, with its resilience and unwavering determination, eventually triumphed, turning the tide of the war. Scipio Africanus decisively defeating Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, marking the end of Carthaginian dominance and the rise of Rome as the undisputed power in the Mediterranean. The victory allowed Rome to impose a humiliating peace treaty upon Carthage, crippling its power and influence. Carthage was forced to relinquish its overseas territories, ceding control of vital trade routes and resources. They also had to surrender their navy, effectively ending their maritime power, and were stripped of the right to wage war without explicit Roman consent, reducing them to a subservient state. For 50 years, an uneasy peace held between the two powers, a period of relative calm in the wake of decades of conflict. But beneath the surface, suspicion and resentment simmered, a constant undercurrent of animosity threatening to erupt at any moment. In Rome, every sign of Carthaginian recovery and success was viewed with alarm and suspicion, interpreted as a potential threat to their hard-won dominance. The specter of Hannibal continued to haunt their collective memory, fueling their paranoia and determination to keep Carthage in check. In Carthage, the sting of defeat was a festering wound, carefully masked by a veneer of renewed prosperity and commercial success. But their national pride remained deeply wounded, stifled by the ever-present reality of Roman dominance and control. Carthage diligently rebuilt its wealth and infrastructure, becoming a major economic power once again. However, its sovereignty was ultimately a mere fiction, a facade masking its true status as a Roman puppet state. Meanwhile, Rome continued to grow ever stronger, expanding its territories and consolidating its power across the Mediterranean world. Carthage, on the other hand, chafed under the weight of humiliating restrictions imposed by Rome, fueling their resentment and desire for liberation. The hatred between Rome and Carthage endured, undiminished by time or circumstance, a poisonous legacy passed down through generations. It was a fire banked, carefully tended, and ready to be unleashed once more, not extinguished, merely smoldering beneath the surface. The stage was now irrevocably set for one final, tragic act in their long and bloody drama, a final confrontation that would determine the fate of Carthage and reshape the course of history. The relentless drumbeat pushing Rome towards war with Carthage reached a fever pitch, fueled by a singular, unwavering voice. The final decisive push came from Marcus Porcius Cato, Cato the Elder, a figure of immense influence and unyielding conviction within the Roman Senate. He was a man consumed by the belief that Carthage posed an existential threat to Rome's dominance. Cato ended every Senate speech, regardless of the topic at hand, with the same chilling refrain: Carthage must be destroyed. It was his personal mantra, a constant reminder of what he perceived as an unavoidable necessity. His obsession, bordering on fanaticism, slowly but surely seeped into the Roman psyche, turning long-held Roman paranoia and suspicion into concrete policy. He masterfully played on the fears of his fellow senators, painting Carthage as a lurking menace ready to strike at any moment. While Cato's rhetoric provided the ideological justification for war, the actual spark that ignited the conflict came from Numidia, Rome's ambitious and opportunistic North African ally. Their king Massinissa, a shrewd and ruthless ruler, saw the fragile peace between Rome and Carthage as an opportunity for territorial expansion. Exploiting the restrictions imposed by the peace treaty, he systematically seized Carthaginian lands, inching closer and closer to their capital. Massinissa knew that Carthage was effectively neutered, unable to mount any significant military resistance without explicit Roman approval, a permission that would never be granted. Rome, consistently siding with their loyal ally Numidia, turned a blind eye to Massinissa's aggressive land grabs, effectively strangling Carthage economically and politically. This slow, deliberate erosion of Carthaginian power was a calculated strategy. In 151 BCE, after years of enduring these provocations and seeing their territory dwindle, pushed to the absolute brink of desperation, Carthage, in a desperate act of self-preservation, finally fought back against Numidia, a clear violation of the treaty that had bound their hands for so long. The Carthaginian army, weakened and ill-equipped after decades of imposed peace, was swiftly and decisively crushed by Numidia. This defeat provided Rome with the perfect excuse they had been waiting for. In the eyes of Rome, Carthage had irrevocably broken the sacred peace treaty, a treaty that was meant to ensure lasting stability in the region. Cato and the Senate, seizing the opportune moment with ruthless efficiency, declared war on Carthage in 149 BCE, setting in motion a conflict that would determine the fate of an empire. To Carthage, this declaration of war felt like the ultimate betrayal, the culmination of years of manipulation and broken promises. But to Rome, it was framed as a necessary measure, a matter of national security and the preservation of their dominance in the Mediterranean. The long and contentious debate within the Roman Senate was finally over. The mighty Roman legions, the most formidable fighting force in the ancient world, mobilized for war. This was not simply a war for territorial gains or political influence, but a brutal, existential struggle for the very survival and existence of a once proud city and its people. The final devastating chapter in the Punic Wars, a conflict that would reshape the course of history, had officially begun. Rome's consuls for 149 BCE, Manius Manilius and Lucius Marcius Censorinus, prepared to lead the assault. Manilius commanded the legions, Censorinus the fleet. They expected a swift victory. Carthage's defense fell to Hasdrubal the Boeotarch, a determined leader facing impossible odds. He was no Hannibal, but he inspired desperate hope. Carthage's citizens, from nobles to artisans, became soldiers. The Council of Elders scrambled to manage the crisis, caught between Rome's demands and their people's defiance. Rome's army, 80,000 infantry, 4,000 cavalry, was a force bred for conquest. As they sailed from Sicily, their purpose was clear: erase Carthage, fulfill Cato's prophecy. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Rome's campaign began with deception, a calculated strategy designed to cripple Carthage without a direct confrontation. The Roman war machine, ever pragmatic, understood that psychological warfare could be just as effective as brute force. Their initial moves were subtle, masked in the guise of diplomacy, but their true intentions were far more sinister. Roman envoys, cloaked in the garb of peace, demanded 300 noble Carthaginian children as hostages. This request, seemingly reasonable on the surface, was a calculated blow to Carthage's morale and leadership. These children represented the future of Carthage, and their removal was a deep wound to the city's pride and security. Carthage, clinging to the hope of averting war, reluctantly complied, hoping for peace through appeasement. The Carthaginian counselors believed that by meeting Rome's demands, they could buy time and negotiate a lasting settlement. Little did they know that this was merely the first step in a series of escalating demands designed to bring Carthage to its knees. But the demands escalated, revealing Rome's true agenda. Next, surrender all weapons and armor. This was a far more significant blow, effectively disarming the city and rendering it defenseless against any potential aggression. The Romans knew that a disarmed Carthage was a Carthage ripe for conquest. Carthage, now increasingly desperate and with limited options, agreed, sacrificing its military might in the vain hope of preserving its existence. The Carthaginian leaders were caught in a trap, each concession only leading to further demands and a deeper sense of despair. Their defenses were stripped away piece by piece, leaving the once proud city vulnerable and exposed. The dismantling of Carthage's military infrastructure was a public display of its subjugation, a clear signal that its independence was hanging by a thread. Then came the final blow, the ultimate act of treachery: abandon the city, move inland, and let Carthage be destroyed. This demand was not just about territorial gain, it was about the complete annihilation of Carthaginian identity and culture. It was a demand designed to break the spirit of the Carthaginian people. The betrayal was complete. The mask of diplomacy had fallen away, revealing the cold, calculating face of Roman ambition. The Carthaginians had been led down a path of false promises, only to be confronted with the stark reality of Rome's ruthless intentions. Rage erupted in Carthage, a furious storm of resentment and defiance sweeping through the city. The people, finally realizing the extent of Rome's deceit, turned against their own leaders, who had advocated for appeasement. The appeasers were overthrown, their voices silenced by the collective anger of the populace. Hasdrubal, a staunch advocate for resistance, was made commander, entrusted with the daunting task of defending the city against the might of Rome. The city transformed into a fortress, fueled by a desperate determination to survive. Temples stripped for metal to forge weapons, women's hair woven into ropes for siege engines, every citizen, regardless of age or status, united in the common cause of defense. Carthage, disarmed and betrayed, its back against the wall, chose to fight, to defy the seemingly inevitable, and to make the Romans pay dearly for their treachery. The city gates slammed shut, a resounding declaration of defiance echoing across the land, signaling the beginning of a desperate struggle for survival. The Romans had not come to negotiate, but to destroy, to erase Carthage from the map and claim its territory as their own. Their intentions were clear, their resolve unwavering. Carthage's last hope was resistance, a desperate gamble against overwhelming odds, a testament to the enduring spirit of a people unwilling to surrender their freedom. The siege had begun, a brutal and relentless assault on the city's walls, but the city's spirit was unbroken, its resolve hardened by the injustice it had suffered. The final act of defiance had started, a desperate struggle for survival against a relentless enemy, a battle that would determine the fate of Carthage and its people. Carthage would not go quietly, it would fight to the bitter end, its name forever etched in the annals of history as a symbol of resistance against tyranny. The Romans expected surrender, but met fierce resistance. Their plan for a quick victory collapsed. The legions faced legendary walls and determined defenders. Initial Roman assaults were repulsed by citizens fighting with makeshift weapons. Hasdrubal's field army harassed Roman supply lines, striking and vanishing. These skirmishes bled the Romans and disrupted their siege. Carthaginian resolve was no bluff. They held their ground. The Romans learned this would be a brutal, drawn-out fight. Both sides realized the war would be won by endurance, not speed. Carthage itself was Rome's greatest obstacle. Triple walls, 45 feet high and 30 feet thick, ringed the city. Behind them, stables, barracks, and supplies. An engineered fortress. The city's harbors, protected by seawalls and iron chains, were nearly impregnable. Roman siege engines failed against the massive defenses. The legions, used to open-field victories, were stalled and demoralized. Disease and heat took their toll in the Roman camp. The siege dragged on, draining Roman morale and resources. Carthage's walls became a symbol of defiance. With direct assaults failing, the Romans shifted tactics. Manilius targeted the landward wall. Censorinus attacked the harbor isthmus. Massive siege towers and battering rams pounded the defenses. Carthaginians fought back with ingenuity. Night raids set Roman towers ablaze. Inside, workshops ran day and night, forging weapons and building defenses. When Romans breached a wall, Hasdrubal's forces met them in brutal close combat, repulsing the attack. Roman morale faltered. Their breach had failed. Censorinus, ill and frustrated, withdrew for the summer. The initiative slipped from Rome's grasp. Carthage's will proved as formidable as its walls. The defenders had won a crucial victory. The siege spread beyond Carthage's walls. Hasdrubal's field army, based at Nepharis, kept supply lines open and harassed the Romans. Manilius, desperate to break the stalemate, marched to crush Hasdrubal. The Romans were ambushed and routed, another humiliating defeat. Roman invincibility was shattered, morale plummeted. For Carthage, victory at Nepharis brought hope. They had survived, resisted, and now defeated Rome in the field. The first year ended in stalemate, neither side victorious. Rome dug in for a long winter, awaiting new leadership. Inside Carthage, hope flickered, but resources dwindled. Both sides had tasted victory and defeat. The fate of Carthage remained uncertain. The world watched, waiting to see if the city would endure or be erased forever. Imagine two colossal empires, titans of their age, standing on opposite sides of the Mediterranean Sea, poised for a clash that would echo through the centuries. Their destinies intertwined, their ambitions colliding. Rome, a burgeoning republic forged in the fires of discipline and ambition, a society of citizen soldiers and shrewd senators, its power steadily growing, hungry for dominance. And Carthage, a venerable city-state, a maritime powerhouse built on trade and naval supremacy, a cosmopolitan hub teeming with sailors, merchants, and the wealth of nations. For over a century, these superpowers engaged in a series of brutal conflicts known as the Punic Wars, a struggle for supremacy that would determine the fate of the Western world. They were fighting not just for control of the sea lanes and vital trade routes, but for their very survival, their identities, their way of life. The First Punic War was a protracted and brutal naval struggle, a war of attrition fought across the vast expanse of the Mediterranean, testing the limits of both empires. The second, however, became legendary. Hannibal, the brilliant Carthaginian general, daringly marched his army, including war elephants, over the treacherous Alps, a feat of military genius and logistical nightmare. He inflicted devastating defeats upon the Roman legions, nearly breaking the Republic's will to fight and threatening the very heart of Rome itself. Yet Rome, with its resilience and unwavering determination, endured the onslaught, adapted its strategies, and ultimately found a way to defeat Hannibal on his own terms. But the memory of Hannibal's audacious campaign and the immense suffering it caused haunted the Roman psyche for generations to come. Carthage, though defeated, was not destroyed. It was stripped of its overseas empire, its once mighty navy reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. Furthermore, it was forbidden to wage war without the express permission of Rome, effectively making it a vassal state. For the next 50 years, Carthage, displaying remarkable resilience, focused on rebuilding its shattered economy through trade and commerce, slowly regaining its former prosperity. However, Rome, ever vigilant and suspicious, viewed this economic recovery with growing unease and distrust. To many influential Romans, a prosperous Carthage was inherently a dangerous Carthage, a potential threat to Rome's dominance in the Mediterranean. It was a rival that, despite its defeat, refused to simply fade away, a constant reminder of Rome's near destruction. Influential senators, most notably Cato the Elder, relentlessly stoked these fears and prejudices within the Roman Senate and the wider populace. He would end every speech, regardless of the topic, with the chilling declaration, Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed, painting Carthage as a serpent waiting to strike. Rome's peace, it seemed, could only be truly enforced through the complete and utter annihilation of its former adversary. The very idea of peaceful coexistence of two great powers sharing the Mediterranean seemed utterly impossible to the Roman mindset. In order for Rome to truly feel safe and secure, Carthage, in their eyes, had to be completely and irrevocably erased from the map. This was not simply a matter of strategic calculation or political expediency. It was fueled by a deep-seated desire for revenge and a desperate yearning to finally put an end to the lingering fear and insecurity that Carthage represented. And so, the stage was set for a final merciless confrontation, a war of annihilation that would determine the ultimate fate of Carthage. Cato the Elder, a figure of unwavering conviction, became the voice of Rome's growing paranoia. He saw danger lurking in every shadow, a threat to Rome's dominance. He relentlessly ended every Senate speech, regardless of the topic, with the chilling declaration, Carthage must be destroyed. It was a constant drumbeat of fear and a call to action. On a diplomatic visit to Carthage, Cato was not met with a crumbling city, but was instead deeply alarmed by its evident prosperity and bustling trade. He returned to Rome more convinced than ever of Carthage's potential threat, seeing their economic strength as a direct challenge to Roman power. Carthage's remarkable revival after the Second Punic War was viewed with suspicion, seen as nothing more than the quiet funding of a future war machine, a sleeping giant ready to awaken. The existing peace treaty, designed to keep Carthage in check, explicitly forbade them from waging war without Rome's permission. However, Rome's opportunistic ally, Numidia, exploited this treaty, launching frequent raids into Carthaginian lands, knowing Carthage was hamstrung. Desperate for relief, Carthage repeatedly appealed to Rome for help and intervention, seeking justice against Numidian aggression. But the Roman Senate, blinded by paranoia and ambition, deliberately ignored their pleas. letting the crisis fester and deepen, waiting for an opportunity. Rome patiently waited, like a predator stalking its prey, for Carthage to make a mistake, any mistake, that would justify their long-desired war. After decades of forced restraint and enduring Numidian attacks, Carthage, pushed to the brink, finally retaliated and fought back against Numidian aggression, inadvertently breaking the treaty they had so desperately tried to uphold. This act of defiance was exactly what Rome had been waiting for. A legal excuse, however flimsy, to unleash their military might and finally crush their rival. Cato's relentless call for Carthage's destruction, once seen as extreme, now had the justification it needed in the eyes of the Roman Senate and the Roman people. The carefully constructed trap was sprung, the pieces were in place, and the stage was set for a final devastating conflict. The final showdown, a clash of civilizations, was now inevitable, a bloody conclusion to decades of rivalry and simmering resentment. Carthage's fate, it seemed, was sealed, the die was cast, and the once proud city faced its darkest hour. The ink had barely dried on the broken treaty, a testament to Rome's insatiable hunger for power. Diplomatic niceties were cast aside, and the drums of war began to beat once more. Rome declared war, not under the pretense of territorial expansion or mere dominance, but with a chillingly clear objective: annihilation. The very existence of Carthage was deemed an affront to Roman ambition. A massive Roman army, the largest seen in decades, was assembled and transported across the Mediterranean, landing on the shores of Africa like a swarm of locusts. Their arrival signaled the end of an era. Carthage, gripped by terror, saw the writing on the wall. The city, once a proud rival, desperately tried to surrender, hoping to appease the Roman war machine and salvage what remained of their civilization. But Rome, fueled by years of resentment and a thirst for absolute victory, had no interest in a peaceful resolution. Their demands were cruel, designed to humiliate and cripple Carthage beyond repair. First, as a token of submission and a guarantee of future compliance, 300 noble children were demanded as hostages, ripped from their families and sent to Rome. Carthage, with heavy hearts and trembling hands, complied with this initial demand, clinging to the faint hope that it would be enough to satisfy Rome's bloodlust. They desperately sought a path to peace, however narrow, but Rome, in its relentless pursuit of dominance, demanded more, each concession only fueling their appetite for total control. The noose was tightening around Carthage's neck. All weapons, every sword, spear, and war machine were to be surrendered, leaving Carthage utterly defenseless against any future aggression. The city was being stripped bare, its power systematically dismantled. Carthage, now stripped of its defenses and its future seemingly mortgaged, waited with bated breath, hoping against hope for a sign of mercy, a glimmer of compassion from their implacable foe. Instead, Rome delivered its final, crushing blow, an ultimatum so devastating it shattered any remaining illusions of a peaceful resolution. The hammer was about to fall. The city, the heart of Carthaginian civilization, must be abandoned and utterly destroyed, its people forced to relocate far inland, severing their connection to the sea and their history. The Carthaginians, finally realizing the full extent of Rome's treachery, understood they'd been lured into a trap, their good faith exploited to pave the way for their complete annihilation. Rome wanted not just their submission, but their complete and utter erasure from the face of the earth, their home reduced to rubble and their legacy forgotten. Rage, grief, and a desperate will to survive erupted within the city walls, transforming despair into a fierce determination to resist. Negotiation, compromise, and any hope for a peaceful resolution was definitively over, replaced by the grim reality of a fight for survival. The city's leaders, facing impossible odds, vowed to fight to the last man, even without weapons, even without hope, for the sake of their city and their people. The time for submission was long past. The time for desperate resistance, for a heroic last stand, had finally come. Rome's true intentions, masked by empty promises and false pretenses, were now laid bare for all the world to see. Total destruction, the complete obliteration of Carthage, was the only acceptable outcome in the eyes of the Roman Senate. But Carthage, defiant in the face of annihilation, would not surrender quietly, would not fade into history without a fight. The final desperate war, a clash of civilizations, a battle for survival, had begun in earnest. The world would soon witness a city's last stand, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Rome's ultimatum transformed Carthage from despair to defiance. The city, stripped of weapons, became a giant workshop. Temples melted for swords, women's hair braided for ropes. The Romans expected an easy victory but met fierce resistance. Carthage's massive walls and improvised weapons held off Rome for 2 years. General Hasdrubal organized a spirited defense, repelling repeated Roman assaults. Disease and low morale plagued the Roman camp. Carthage even launched counterattacks, destroying Roman equipment. Inside, life was grim. Food scarce, every citizen mobilized. Yet hope persisted. They had defied Rome and survived. But Rome's resolve only hardened. The Senate demanded a new commander to break the deadlock. The siege was about to enter its most brutal phase. Rome, frustrated by the stalemate, turned to Scipio Aemilianus, grandson of the legendary Scipio Africanus. Though young, Scipio was chosen by popular demand and sent to Africa. He found the Roman army in chaos and quickly restored discipline. Scipio's strategy was ruthless. He built a massive causeway to block Carthage's harbor, cutting off all supplies. Starvation became inevitable. Carthage, desperate, secretly built a fleet and broke through the blockade, briefly. The Roman navy crushed them. Carthage's last hope at sea was gone. With the city sealed, Scipio tightened the noose. The defenders faced starvation and despair. The final assault was coming. Scipio was determined to finish what Rome had started. Carthage's fate was now inescapable. The end drew near. By spring 146 BCE, Carthage was starving but refused to surrender. Scipio launched his final assault, targeting the harbor district. After fierce fighting, Roman legions broke into the city. The battle became a week-long massacre, every street, every house contested. Civilians fought with anything they could find. Romans set buildings ablaze to clear resistance. The city became a hellscape of fire, smoke, and death. The last stand took place at the Byrsa citadel. After 6 days, 50,000 survivors surrendered and were sold into slavery. A handful of Roman deserters and Hasdrubal's family made a final, doomed stand in the Temple of Eshmun. Hasdrubal surrendered, but his wife, cursing him, leapt into the flames with their children. The resistance was over. Carthage had fallen. Rome's vengeance was complete. As Carthage burned, Scipio Aemilianus stood among the ruins, victorious but somber. He had fulfilled Rome's wish. Carthage was erased. Yet seeing the devastation, Scipio wept, reflecting on the fate of all empires. He quoted Homer, thinking of Troy and perhaps Rome's own future, but duty prevailed. The city was plundered for 10 days. Then Roman crews demolished Carthage, building by building. Legend says they sowed the earth with salt, cursing it forever. A city of 7 centuries was gone, its people killed or enslaved, its knowledge lost. Rome stood alone as master of the Mediterranean. The destruction was a warning to the world: defy Rome and be annihilated. The war was over, but the cost was immense. Carthage's name was to be forgotten. Rome's supremacy was absolute. The fall of Carthage marked a turning point. Rome's transformation into an empire accelerated. The Mediterranean became Rome's mare nostrum. Wealth from Carthage fueled Rome's rise and its internal strife. The phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," became a byword for total war. Carthage's story survived only in the words of its conquerors. Ironically, a new Roman Carthage rose from the ashes, later becoming a center of Christianity. Today, its ruins near Tunis remind us of a lost civilization. The Third Punic War is a lesson in fear, hatred, and the cost of victory. Even the greatest empires are built on the ashes of those they destroy.